Daisy Frazier, and through some of the programs, Ebony Vision and the Juneteenth celebration that we support from UU, and all of the activities that are sponsored in the community to make our community a better, safer place to live. And so Arletta is graduating from Marian University on the 18th of May, and we're all invited. And it's at 12:30, and we would meet in the gymnasium, and if you want to cheer her on, because we are very proud of her for what she has accomplished. And her profession is to become a public speaker. She will be in the TED Talk. For those of, I know a lot of people come here go to the TED Talk thing at Thelma, and she will be one of the presenters. So it is a delight to have Arletta here today to speak with you.
I'm gonna have to be a little bit more enthusiastic than that already. Okay, that was so much better. Okay. My first thing is I just want to thank you all for having me here today. It's really, really an honor to be here. And in regards to my career as a motivational speaker, I have already become a motivational speaker, and actually recently started my own business for motivational speaking, and it's entitled Authentically Arletta LLC. So I'm so absolutely grateful and ecstatic for all the things that I've been able to accomplish over the last couple of years, even as I started my journey at Marian University. I'm so excited, like beyond words. There are not words that have been described quite yet that can really say how I feel about being able to graduate next weekend. It was a struggle. It was overwhelming. It took a lot of resilience and perseverance to be able to get to that place. But now that I have arrived, I can truly say with everything in me that it was worth every ounce of it. For the joy that my mother feels when she looks at me and she says the things that we thought were impossible have now been made possible. The young little black girls that look at me and look for me on billboards and look for me at Moraine Park Technical College and becoming the face of Marian and things like that, those that look and admire the steps that I had to take to get to where I am. I'm so eternally grateful that God chose me, because he could have chosen anyone to kind of trailblaze. So I'm appreciative of this opportunity and this moment. I also wanted to take this opportunity to extend a very special thank you to those of you who may have contributed to my educational funding, assisting with helping me to complete my education at Marian. That would not have been possible without you. I kind of got in the final stretch there, and that very last semester ran out of funding altogether to complete. And my cousin Daisy Frazier, she kind of tapped and talked to Lisetta, and they kind of got things together. They met up with me, and I have to tell you that the meeting that I had with many of your leaders here was just truly amazing. I felt really comfortable, and you could just feel the love. I was telling my friend Jeff here that I just felt like sunshine when I left just meeting him, because he had a way about himself that made me feel well received sitting there. So, all of the thank yous out of the way, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, where I come from, and how did I come to stand here. But before I do that, I do have a question for you. Have you ever heard of the term curiosity kills the cat? Yeah. Okay, can anyone in here, since curiosity is our thing, can anyone tell me why is curiosity killing cats?
Yeah.
Please help me.
It isn't about kitty cats.
It's not.
It's about catfish. What? It's about catfish.
Say more.
So if you catch a catfish, the way you clean it, you skin it. Curiosity killed the cat. He bought that book.
Oh no. Okay, so now that I have clarity on that, I think I feel a little bit more free to go forward with this curiosity today. So searching for meaning and truth in life is a part of what your faith statement says online. I believe I can agree that we all have had moments where we search for what our truth is internally. And from the looks of this room, many of you have found it. So curiosity is your theme, and that is what you're going to be celebrating this month. But does anyone in here have a strong desire to know or to learn something different about someone maybe that you have not walked alongside, maybe someone that you may never come to a barbecue at our house, or you don't know about her background? Well, today I'm going to just expose myself a little bit and tell you the backgrounds of where I come from and how I came to be here, which is why it's entitled My Story. Okay, so to start off, I've been in the city of Fond du Lac for over 28 years now. I came here when I was 10 years old, and I was actually with my mother, who was escaping a very abusive relationship. My father was certainly very, very, very abusive, not only to my mother, but also to us children. It was a very, very tough situation, and there were many threats to our lives that were given. And my mother did what any brave woman would do, and she covered her children. She made sure that we had what we needed, and we had an uncle and an aunt who resided here in Fond du Lac, and also my cousins, Rufus and Wallene Frazier. And they are the reason why we're here, because they said we can make space for you. We have a friend that's going to be traveling down south to Louise, Mississippi, and he can kind of just scoop you up along the way on his way back. What he didn't know is that my mother had 5 small children, and he didn't have a vehicle that fit the capacity of 5 small children. So we packed it out, and within a week's time, my mother sold everything that we had. She sold right out of the front door. I recall a little sign on the stairwell that says, "Come and get it. Come and get it. Everything's for sale." And my mother took what she could scrape up in that last week, and she packed one single solo box, and she moved us here to Fond du Lac, a place I had never even heard of. And plus, at 10 years old, whoever challenges their mom anyways, it's like, okay, so we're going on a trip. We're going on a trip. So we ended up here in Fond du Lac, and to say the least, shortly after we ended up here, about 8 months, we became homeless. It was at that time that we ended up at the Bethany House. Are any of you aware of what the Bethany House is? So Bethany House had a policy at that time that said that you can only keep families or individuals for 30 days tops. So they wanted to have you established with employment and hopefully a home, a place to stay in 30 days. Unfortunately for us, we ran into a very huge problem. I wouldn't say small problem. My mother had trouble finding housing because of the fact that she was black. So the city of Fond du Lac was not ready to receive people of color. And we ended up staying in the homeless shelter for over 6 months because they couldn't find a place for us to live. Every door was shut until the Commonwealth Reporter, which is now known as the Reporter here in town, did a front page newspaper article highlighting my mother on the very front page of this article, and it states, "Mother just wants to find shelter for her children." And then it gives a full cover of my mother sitting in the middle on this chair and us children surrounding my mom. And we received an overwhelming response from the city of Fond du Lac. I mean, love you could not imagine. And as a child, I couldn't imagine it then. But I think that is something that I really choose to highlight even when I go to speak every other place. If you've never heard anything about Fond du Lac that could be good, I highlight the good things of Fond du Lac that I recall and I remember, such as the times while we spent at the homeless shelter, how they made it feel like home. The times I would wake up on Easter morning and have a string tied around my finger with yarn, and it was connected to my Easter basket that was hidden somewhere in the house, and I had to untangle and unravel this string. But these were the many things that reminded me of home. So even though we were homeless, we had no idea that we were homeless because the people there, the directors and the staff, made it seem as if though we were at home. And I'm so eternally grateful for that. And I always share that story because I just think that Fond du Lac a lot of times gets a bad rap for how they're received for people of color. But I've been here for 28 years and I'm still here. I'm raising my family here, and Fond du Lac is home for me. To make a long story short, I eventually decided that I wanted change in my life. And along this road that I have called life now, I value authenticity. Authenticity is a word that gets used, overly used, but without enough critique or criticism. So oftentimes people say I'm authentic to self, but exactly what does that mean? When you say that you are your authentic self, what are you getting at? And I think it's important for each and every one of us as individuals to define authenticity. I have actually picked that up as one of my life's journeys. If I do nothing else when I leave this world, they will know what authentically Arletta is. They will know what authenticity truly is. And what it is for me, and I will define it for myself, it is not the dictionary meaning, however it is connected. So authenticity is knowing your true self, being your true self, enveloping the truth of who you really are. So when people receive you, they receive the truth of who you are. I grew up in a time where I spent much time feeling like I was different. Growing up here in the city of Fond du Lac, I felt like there was something always odd or off about me because I never looked like anyone else in the room. And because of that, I began to define myself by those means. By the definition that others would give me, I defined me. As I got older and began to do a little bit more criticism and critique to myself, I made up in my mind that it just wasn't enough to conform to what everyone else thought I should be. I got tired of trying to fit the guideline and the definition that everyone else presented to me. And I decided that it was time out for that. So I picked myself up by the bootstraps and I began to step outside of the shadow that was created for me. And I began to live my life based upon what my truths were, what was lying within my heart, what were my value systems. You see, at the age of 15, I ended up going back to Mississippi because I was in search. I was curious to know whether or not my father really loved me, because I witnessed him so many times hurt me and hurt my mother, that I decided that I wanted to take a trip out of curiosity. And when we went back home for a family gathering or a family reunion, I pleaded with my mother, please leave me here to stay with my dad. Leave me here to be with my dad. Because just like any other young girl, I wanted that relationship with my father so badly. And I was willing to give up just about anything to have it. So my mother kind of agreed. Although she cried many, many tears, she did not want to leave me in Mississippi. She agreed and we moved on from there. However, while I was down there, I suffered the most enormous rejection of my life. My father, whom she left me to be with, did not come for me. I was left at my aunt's house, and inside of my aunt's house was a total of 15 adults, and that's not including children living in a 3-bedroom house. There was hardly anyone working within the home, which meant that there was barely minimal amounts to survive on. So at the age of 15, I began to prostitute. I began to prostitute for security, for means of survival, for ways to be able to meet my needs, my necessities, which were just to eat sometimes and just to have clean underwear was always a goal of mine. My father eventually came to look for me. But the problem is that he came off of assumption. He had heard a story about a young girl who was selling herself in Yazoo City, Mississippi, and wanted to get to the root of it. He didn't want to believe that it was his daughter. So he came to me not to come and rescue me, which I dreamed of that moment, in which he would lay his eyes on me and he would say everything that he thought I was, and it was going to restore me. It was going to restore the broken pieces, the broken places of me that I felt like I was deserted and left without as a child. But my father, he called me everything but his daughter. He gave me labels and names that sometimes I still fight with now to this day. My father did not come to restore me, but he came to lay blame on me. My father came to break me even more, and the pieces that I thought couldn't be shattered any further were shattered in that moment. I spent every moment from that moment that my father criticized and critiqued me into living up to the self-bias and the self-fulfilling prophecy that he spoke over me. So you say that I'm a whore, then that's what I'll be. You say that I'm a slut and I have no value, that's what I'll be. I'll live up to what you say to me because I believe you for the words you spoke over me. So I ended up coming back to Fond du Lac. My mother came back shortly, a couple of months after that, and I had lost a total of 60 pounds while I was down there. I was literally starving. Literally starving. Unfortunate to say, the business wasn't as good as what I thought it ought to be, and I was receiving minimal pay for my services, if you will. And I came back home, but unfortunately for my mother, I was no longer that innocent girl that she left behind. I had gotten a totally different lot on life, and I began to let that shine forth in my pursuit to find security and love from another individual. So at the age of 16, I became pregnant with my son, who is now sitting over here right along with me. He is now 21 years old today, and needless to say, we made it. I was considered that girl 1 in 10 who has difficulties throughout the pregnancy, and unfortunately, we both almost died during delivery. His heart rate dropped and both mine did drop at 70 percentile. So we were at less than 30% for our heart rates. And so they ended up performing an emergency cesarean in which they delivered him right away. But unfortunately for me, that meant no anesthesia. So I was cut at the age of 16. A horror story is the least I could say about that. But I'm very, very grateful that I chose to keep my baby and keep my son because he is the light of my world. I do everything that I do for my children. I strive to be the very best at who I am because of my children. I pursued my education and I wanted to reach forth in regards to my future because of my children. I've entered into relationships that did not serve me well. My very first marriage, I was abused horribly, drugged through the house, pinched in my side. My husband suffered from alcoholism, and it was just really a nightmare. I had to watch as my children's heart broke as they did not have their father around, and he would suffer and go through many counts of incarceration. So I would be left to try to fend for myself. I worked here in the city of Fond du Lac in a financial institution for over 14 years. I served at U.S. Bank for 4 years and 10 plus years at National Exchange Bank and Trust as one of their lead tellers. Needless to say, throughout my experience there, it was very interesting, the interactions that I encountered with many of the people in the city of Fond du Lac. It's very, very hard, and I will say this as bluntly as I can say, it's very difficult and very hard to be the only African-American person to reside in a white space. I can't say it prettier than that, and I won't choose to say it prettier than that. It's very hard, it's disheartening, and it can be very, very discouraging. So every day, I spent most of my days telling myself that it was okay just to show up. Telling myself, because I didn't know what ignorant customer was gonna walk through the door and say something crazy or belittle me in the public eye or make me feel less than what I already felt walking through those doors, not having a space or residing in a space and giving over 10 plus years or more of your life and still not belonging. Needless to say, that's my truth. And but after a long bit of complacency, I decided that I thought that there was more to life than being a bank teller. And that's no slight against bank tellers, because I absolutely love the work that I do, but I think that it was that I love the people more than I love the work. So I decided that I wanted to be a nurse, because of course, if you love people, you should be a nurse, right? No, wrong. So I went to Moraine Park Technical College and I applied to their nursing program. And of course, once I found out that I was going to be handling needles and there was like all types of blood and stuff involved, my love for people kind of lessened a little bit. It lessened a little bit. So I said, okay, no, that's not it. That's not what we're going to do. So I ended up pursuing my education in leadership development in which I graduated in May of 2017 with a leadership development degree along with 4 other certifications. I then decided to pursue the rest of my degree at Marion University because I figured out my purpose and who I am and who I'm supposed to be along this journey. I discovered that I am a motivational speaker, and I discovered that I do have purpose, but my purpose purpose lies within inspiring and encouraging and uplifting others. That is my purpose. And when I speak to people, I can identify and I feel from the room when I stand in front of people. Right now, I'm at home. I'm standing in a space where I feel like I'm doing exactly what I was created in the world to do. That is my heart, and that is my wish for everyone that chooses to pursue a background in anything. If you're going to wake up and do it every day, make sure it's something that you love. Make sure it's something that gives passion and drives you. Make sure that you have compassion and that you can show forth empathy in whatever line of work that you do, because it's the best work gets done when you are focused on others. When you're focused on other individuals and making them the very best version of themselves that they can be. So I have found that line of work, and I have since then accomplished so much at Marian University. I tell you, Marian University really took me to the place where I needed to be, and they've encouraged me, and now I'm well on my way. As said before by Lisetta, I have established my business as a public and motivational speaker. I am now on the Wisconsin Speakers Association. I'm getting ready to join the National Speakers Association. I have been selected as a TEDx speaker for the Fond du Lac region coming up here August 17th. I've also been traveling back and forth to all Marian University. I did their student leadership conferences. I have as well taking on Moraine Park Technical College, which is going to be doing a full spread coming out in the next month of me returning home to Moraine Park to also let them know how life has changed and what my future looks like now because of education. Now, for those of you that education has been made possible for you and it wasn't a struggle and it was just handed to you, surely you may not understand where I'm coming from. But for me, I am redefining the generational baton that was handed to me. This functionality that was handed to me was not the future of my children anymore. Alcoholism that was handed to me is not the future of my children anymore. Having that entire picture of abuse and neglect is not the picture or the future for my children anymore. It is indeed a future that consists of education, the understanding that if you achieve your education, that anything and everything is possible. But it was not defined on its own. It was by people like you. It was people like you that stood by me and encouraged me to keep going when I felt like giving up. When I felt like it was impossible, I continued on the road, and here I stand before you. So it was not only an honor for me to be here today, to be able to share a portion of my story, where I come from and who I am, but it was also my moment of gratitude to be able to express towards each and every one of you for standing by my side and taking the journey with me. I certainly thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I thank you for your time, and thank you for listening and hearing my story today.